Please join me in welcoming Nikos.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So the big question indeed is, why should we care about Marxism? We are not Marxists. I assume most of you are not particularly interested in the history of ideas, so why bother? Well, here's why we should bother. Imagine you have a very nice restaurant, a nice, cozy restaurant. Every ingredient is nice and organic. The place is clean. The waiters are friendly. The food is reasonably cheap. And yet your restaurant is completely empty. And then just down the road, there's a stinky, dirty restaurant, unfriendly waiters. Half of the people who go there get food poisoning. And yet that restaurant is always full. And that restaurant is considered the coolest place in town. In that case, if you were in the restaurant business, you should really have to wonder, what does this restaurant do? And despite being a horrendous restaurant, they're always somehow relevant. And this horrendous restaurant is Marxism. Disaster after disaster after failure, and yet here it always is. These ideas never go away. The beautiful, nice, cozy, organic, grass-fed meat restaurant is the ideas of freedom. The ideas that have given humanity its best days. And yet these ideas are not in particular demand. So the fact that Marxism has actually attracted, for the last 150 years, millions of young idealistic people who were ready to kill and to die for, should make us try to understand what is its appeal. Because these are exactly the people you want in your movement. These are exactly the people you want on your side. People who take ideas seriously, people who take seriously the idea that they want to change the world and make it a better place. So what do I know about Marxism? Where I was part of Marxism's appeal. I was actually infatuated with Marxism. I was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, and it's something that at that point I considered the most important thing in my life and in my identity. And I think it's relevant how I got into Marxism, because it says something about why this movement is appealing. I have a family history in Marxism, but to her honor, my mother never tried to pressure me in the movement. But when I was around 15 years old, getting interested in politics, I was looking around. And what did I see? From the center left, from the center right. I was seeing empty suits, boring people, these career politicians. You see them also in this country. These like double-chinned, empty, boring suits who stand for absolutely nothing. And I didn't really understand politics, but I understood one thing, that these people disgust me. Because even a 15-year-old could understand that these people stand for absolutely nothing. And then I look on the other side, and I see this one exception. This group that stood out like the 300 of Leonidas guarding the hot gates. The idealists. And of course, these were the communists. They were the ones who stood for something, who stood for values, who stood for their ideals, and not just stood for their ideals in their living room. They were literally in the barricades. In 1999, I don't know how many of you remember, there was a war in the Balkans. The NATO was bombing Serbia. And of course, everyone in Greece was with our Serbian Orthodox brothers. And I remember one day how proud, I don't know how to put it, I felt when it was everywhere in the news that the Communist Party had went to the highways. Back then there were no Google Maps, and they had changed all the signals so that a convoy of NATO trucks that was going towards the port of Thessaloniki to do something related to the war in Serbia went to the completely wrong direction. I was like, wow, I want to be like these cool people who went the night and changed all the signals. Like, this for me is such a badass. Again, not only a man of ideas or a woman of ideas, not only an intellectual. First of all, to be an intellectual at that point in Greece meant that you're on the left. The left were the ones who were the atheists, the secularists, the ones who were interested in art. Like in a world where no one has any ideals, these are the people I wanted to be like. So this was the first attraction I had to communism. It had nothing to do with books. It had nothing to do with the ideas of Marx. It was this vision, the vision of the idealist. And again, this vision and this inspiration also got shared from hundreds of thousands and millions of other people. So let's try then to reverse engineer. What is it in Marxism that makes it so attractive to so many idealistic people? And we should begin by asking, what is Marxism? And the obvious answer is Marxism is an economic theory, or if you are a bit more geeky, a theory of history. But let me ask you something. How many people become Marxist because they buy into historical materialism? Or if you have any friends who are leftists or Marxists, ask them, have you read Das Kapital? The answer is always no. So the economics is not really what sells in Marxism. Actually, these days, there are Marxists who say, oh, I'm a Marxist, but I don't believe in the labor theory of value, but I'm still a Marxist. Which, if you know anything about Marxism, is absolutely ridiculous. But this says something, right? That the main selling point of Marxism is not economics. So then what is it? Well, Marxism is not just economics. It's something more. It's a moral appeal. It's an ethical claim. What is the slogan of the communist society? Marx described it one time in his life and never came back to it again. But there's a phrase which is very, very powerful. You hear it once, you cannot forget it. From each according to ability to each according to need. I remember I asked my mother once. My mother was a rank and file in the Communist Party. She had been to all the communist countries. She had met very prominent communists, like leader of countries and stuff. She had met actually the leader of East Germany. Anyway, so I asked her at some point, look, you've seen communism and you've seen like the misery and all that stuff. What made you still be a communist? And she said something which I'll always remember. She says, well, it's because if I have a jacket, I want everyone to have a jacket. If I have a jacket, I want everyone else to have a jacket. So this is how communism sells itself. That it's about being of service to other people. It's about putting other people above yourself. And now think about it this way. Have you heard this thing before? Let's say you're a 15-year-old boy. Have you heard this message before? Well, I had heard it from my religious grandmother, who was conservative. I've heard it from my teachers. I went to a very, very conservative school in Greece. I've heard it from every single person who cared to say anything about morality. We've been told from a very young age that morality means putting others above yourself. It's the morality that we would call altruism. And this is a very good selling point. So Marxists have this going on their way, that it's a very easy sell to say that, look, you might disagree with us on anything, but on that one thing you must agree, that we share the same morality. Actually, after the Greek Civil War, the Civil War in Greece was between the communists and, let's say, the bourgeois world, the right, the far right, the center. So the Archbishop of Greece, and of course the church, was vastly anti-communist. He said, you know what, yes, we fight these people, we execute them, but I have to give it to them that there's something very Christian in communists. And actually he was right. Of course, here's the twist. We know, or at least we should know, that what they're selling as altruism is a lie. Because what they're selling is not actual benevolence, kindness, solidarity. If this was the case, then in the communist societies, this would be the characteristic, right? But what they say, what they call as altruism, is something very, very different. It actually, in simple terms, the message that your life is not yours. And your life, you as an individual, doesn't matter. And again, we've seen this time and again, time and again. Chairman Mao in China had a very telling quote. He said something like, "How beautiful is the Chinese people," he said. It's like an empty piece of paper, an empty canvas, where we can draw all these beautiful pictures or these beautiful drawings. And this is how actually a communist sees the individual. You're like this blank slate where they can use you for their big projects. But it doesn't matter, because this is perfectly compatible to the idea that your life isn't yours. Once you've accepted this, you might be 5 minutes, like 5 seconds away from, I don't know, being put against the wall to be executed. But again, it doesn't matter, because you don't matter. Something else matters more, which is the group. And you might be eliminated, but the proletariat is still there. Of course, that's not how they sell it. And however they sell it, it works. And it's the most difficult aspect in communism when it comes to fighting it. And no one dares to fight it. It took an Ayn Rand to dare to actually expose what this morality is about. And of course, she's completely dismissed by anyone who thinks they can fight communism. And to see how strong this morality is, this moral message of sacrifice is, some years after the Berlin Wall fell, there was an opinion poll in East Germany. So these people who had experienced East Germany, one of the strictest communist regimes, and now were living free. And the opinion poll asks them, what do you think about the following statement? And the statement was, socialism was a good idea, but was badly implemented. A good idea, badly implemented. 82% of people replied that they agreed with this slogan. I try to think that. These were people who had experienced the secret police, who had experienced Stasi. These were people who would wake up in the morning and see outside the Berlin Wall. These were people who experienced the long queues, the unfreedom. They've seen it all. And many of these people actually fought the regime. But they could never fight the moral backbone of the regime. This is why Marxism can fail time and again. And then after like 5 minutes, like here we are back again. Like, oops, we screwed up, but remember, we are idealists. We have good purposes. So see, this is the number one strong characteristic of communism. Also something that is very difficult for us to fight. But we'll see at the end how we can do it. Second strong element of communism, second selling point, because a morality by itself wouldn't do the work. I mean, the church has the same morality, but the church was not a particularly influential movement in the 20th century. The second selling point of communism is that it wraps this moral message in an intellectually respectable outfit. Marxism is a movement which presents itself as the best advocate of reason, the best advocate of the Enlightenment, the best advocate of modernity. How did Marx call his socialism so as to distinguish it from all other socialism? Does anyone know? I wanted a bit more suspense so I could have time to drink the water, but you're perfectly right. Scientific socialism. Scientific, right? So this is a science. And this was its big appeal. Because intellectually curious people wanted to be on the side of science and progress. So here's how Marx is presented it. On the one side, you have the parochial, the church, the conservatives, the royalists, the tsarists. Yesterday's world. Ours is the world of tomorrow. Ours is the world of progress. And they did not produce much progress, but they produced plenty of intellectuals. In every single field that you study, your software at some point is influenced by Marxism. Like, should we start naming names? Gramsci, Althusser, Foucault, if we add the fellow travelers. You do history, Hobsbawm. You do linguistics, again Althusser, God knows why, Trotsky, Chomsky. If you add the Marxists and the people who are influenced by Marxists, they're everywhere. And I say good for them. They're doing something right. Earlier, God knows why, I went to Waterstones. Every time I'm in this country, I go to Waterstones excitedly, then I remember why I don't like it, and I leave. But and go and see the books that they have as like suggested books in social sciences. It's not even 9 out of 10. It's 99 out of 100 books that are impacted by Marxism. But again, I give this to the Marxists because they're trying hard for that. They're very conscious on that in expanding in more fields of knowledge, because they understand that ideas are very, very important. They understand where, like, they have this theory that, history is changed by the mode of production. I think if they're serious, they know this is BS. They know that history is decided in the field of ideas. This is why they fight so heavily over there. How did Ayn Rand put it? That intellectuals are the transmission belt of ideas. Like, it starts with the philosophers give the general line, but then it's the intellectuals, each one in his field, who transmits these ideas in journalism, in the field of history, in the field of sociology, in the field of politics. These days, even in the fields of physics and biology, or like, you do business, you go to business school, first semester, first class, corporate responsibility. You still don't know the law of supply and demand, corporate responsibility. Friedrich Hayek said that once the intellectuals are sold on an idea, it's just a matter of time for the rest of the society to buy into this idea. Can you think of an example from the recent years? An idea that was completely parochial, that was a small corner of the academia, and then it's everywhere. On Netflix, on when you go to the tube. Critical race theory. Critical race theory, which is a theory that has nothing to do with actually bringing racial equality, which is a good goal, actually began in the margins of the academia, and within 2 decades, it's literally everywhere. This is what it looks like to fight the battle of ideas and to win. Now, I don't think these people are Marxist, but it doesn't matter. It shows, again, the power of ideas, the power of having a strong intellectual presence. So this is the second element, then, after morality, the respectable intellectual aura around Marx. And that's usually where the analysis stops. But I think there's a third point. There's a third element on the appeal of Marxism. And this is one that is overlooked by many. But for me, at least is the one that worked on me. And this is that Marx, the message of communism, is presented in a very inspiring way. Or at least it used to be presented in a very inspiring way. Put differently, communism was cool. Communism had hype. Communism had vibe. And of course, here we see again the role of the intellectual, but this time, the artists. I'm talking about these brilliant pieces in art and in political propaganda. I mean, there are many of them that are also completely crap, but it doesn't matter. The ones that are good are very, very good. Think about films. Do you know Sergei Eisenstein? He's the guy he's the best Soviet director. He transferred into a film the book about the October Revolution. I watched the scene, even today, where I'm an anti-communist, I watched the scene where Lenin arrives in Petrograd and gives his talk when you go home, go to YouTube and put Eisenstein, October, Lenin arrives at rail station. It's like a 1-minute scene. My hair goes up like that. This is propaganda and art mixing at its best. They knew what they were doing. Or even more recently, think about the 1960s. Marxist or Marxist-inspired directors like Jean-Luc Godard. These were the people who defined what it means to be cool in Paris. Think about music. The music of Shostakovich. I listen to the Leningrad Symphony and I want to grab a red flag. And it's impossible not to. Or the national anthem of East Germany. Like, this is something which is very, very powerful because it connects the ideas with the emotion. And again, it's this vision that come with us and life will be a heroic adventure. Come with us and life will have a meaning beyond anything that you can imagine. Like, you're going to live life at a different level. Or we could say the same with plays, with poetry, the works of Bertolt Brecht. Again, the list is endless. As a poet put it, communism is the youth and the beauty of the world. Of course, we know that communism was not the beauty and the youth of the world. It was literally the most lethal political ideology in the history of humanity. Like, it's if you take the lowest statistics on how many people has communists killed and the highest statistics of how many people has the church killed, the communists has killed vastly much more people than any other political movement in history, including Christianity, which many of us have it in our mind as, a particularly violent, at times, movement. But it doesn't matter, because they managed to sell their ideas in a way that was inspiring. It's as if, imagine you're watching a movie, and it's an absolutely crappy movie, but the soundtrack is so cool that you forget that you watch a crappy movie. This is how propaganda worked for the communists. The bad news is that these days, do you know which is the only movement who I think knows how to use aesthetics and it has some good optics? Thankfully, not the left anymore. They are disgusting. The far right, you can ask me in the Q&A. They are the only ones who understand the importance of aesthetics and of a high vision in political communication. And some years ago, it was also the environmentalists. I remember Greenpeace had a couple of clips. One clip was, I think it was only in Greece, with the music, a song, a 90s like new age song called The Age of Innocence. I watched it when I was, again, 12. And I was like, oh, now I'm an environmentalist, because it was so moving. Or they have this other clip with the song, You Only Get What You Give. And it's 3 minutes of Greenpeace doing heroic things, standing between the whale and the whale ship. I would put it to my students when I would teach communication and stuff, and they would have tears in their eyes. I mean, forget the students. I would have tears in my eyes, although I didn't like Greenpeace. Because again, that's the power of aesthetics, that's the power of image, that's the power of good communication. So this is the 3 important elements at the end of the day of Marxism and of communism. The moral message, the intellectual respectability, and also very important, the inspiring aesthetics, the artistic vision, which thankfully for us is not there anymore. But these 3 were necessary, how it's called, necessary but not sufficient, or sufficient, but they were the necessary condition, but they were not sufficient. They needed one more thing. Because remember, when Marx died, no one knew him. A movement doesn't just need the intellectual and the good ideas. They also need numbers. They also need appeal. And here is the role of the good, of the charismatic figures, of a Lenin, or of a Trotsky, or of a Che Guevara, or of Fidel Castro. The people who will take these ideas and will make it accessible to millions. And every movement has such a guy. Think about Malcolm X. Malcolm X was at some point basically a one-person movement for black nationalism. He was so good, he was so charismatic and excellent as an activist that he carried this movement with him from being very marginal to being very actually prevalent. So these are the things that make a movement important. And now it's a good time to ask ourselves, how is the freedom movement doing in these categories? How are we doing? I use the we like in a wider way. What is the moral message of the freedom movement? Usually it is, we are going to achieve the same things that the left is going to achieve, but with different means. I remember I was speaking in a conference some years ago, and when there was a libertarian who got angry and literally left the room because he said that capitalism is about serving others. But if it's about serving others, why do I need capitalism? If my life is about serving others, I don't need freedom. If my life is about serving others, I need someone to tell me who to serve. If life is about you have to sacrifice for others, then I need a Putin, a Stalin, a Honecker, a Castro to tell me Raz is going to sacrifice for you and you're going to sacrifice for Raz and you for you. I don't need freedom if life is about sacrifice. So thinking that we are going to fight against the left by using the left's morality, that's ridiculous. First of all, we're never, ever, ever going to appease them. It's not that we're going to the left and tell them, look, actually capitalism has served more people, which is true, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, now you're right, now we pack things up. You know Mr. Beast, right? Some months ago, he did these things where, or maybe he didn't do them some months ago, but that's when I discovered him, where he would leave like a tip, like a gold nugget, or he would build wells in Africa, or he would pay for operations, eye operations for people, like as generous stuff as like charity at its best. What is the left's evaluation of Mr. Beast? Now I know there's some stuff going on these days. I haven't followed it, but I mean, forget about this. Like even before that, did the left say, "Oh, here's a rich guy who helps the poor"? Well done. Of course not. Google Mr. Beast egoism, or Mr. Beast selfish, or Mr. Beast capital hypocrisy. You're going to get hundreds of results. You're never going to appease them by telling them, oh, look, I helped the poor. If they cared about helping the poor, they would ask themselves questions about the ideology they've chosen. But they don't. So trying to fight the left by adopting their morality, it's never going to work. What about the intellectual rigor? Do classical liberals out there have intellectual rigor? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. One of the most prominent, supposedly, advocates of freedom and of liberalism is a guy called Francis Fukuyama. You've probably heard him from the End of History thing. So I read his last book, which was something supposedly a defense of liberalism. And his defense of liberalism was, socialism has its problems. Capitalism has its problems. Capitalism has fewer problems than socialism. Therefore, we need some amount of capitalism. Not too much, but some. Now imagine going to a young idealistic person and tell them, come with us. We've killed fewer people than Stalin. How do you think, like, is this going to set their heart on fire? Of course not. And don't even get me started on aesthetics or heroic vision, all that stuff. Most people who are in the liberty movement wouldn't know it if it hit them on the head. So we are faring very, very, very bad on these things. Again, fortunately, these days, also, the communists are faring really bad on these things. They've abandoned the heroic vision. They celebrate distraction, like metaphysical ugliness, but they still have like the momentum from the past, and this is why, and mostly the morality, and that's why they're relevant. So how do we fight them? How do we fight that? What is our, because it's not just about fighting it, you need to give an alternative, a better alternative. If you go to an idealistic person, you have to give them something better. Better in terms of equally inspiring, but this time, something which is going to be for good. So to begin with, we need the morality which says that your life is yours, and actually freedom is an existential necessity. It's not a luxury. Literally, it's an existential necessity. You cannot do anything good in life without freedom. Imagine if you're a gay person in Iran. Literally, you cannot live the most fundamental, basic value in life, which is romantic love. Without freedom, you cannot go after good things in life. That's the one thing we need. We need a defense of freedom which is intellectually rigorous, and also we need a higher inspiring vision of life. Why should you follow us? Or why should you follow our ideas? Because life is going to be brilliant. Not because we have cool graphs, or if you let 2% more freedom, the economy is going to, who cares? So these three things. Now that sounds like a very difficult task. Luckily, someone has already done it for us. And that someone, of course, is Ayn Rand. She has achieved to show how altruism is actually not benevolence and kindness, but it's actually the exact opposite. It's the most inhumane morality. It's literally a morality that sets you against life itself. It has given the intellectually rigorous defense of freedom. And when it comes to the inspiring vision, I don't know any heroes who are larger than life than Rand's heroes. But larger than life, not in a way that, oh, I couldn't do that. They're larger than life, while at the same time they're very humane. Because what makes them larger than life is that they operate something that we all have. Like, I watch Batman, and I'm very inspired, but there's no way I can be like Batman. I don't have the ninja skills. I don't have the bunny of Bruce Wayne. But you see a Randian hero, and you can imagine yourself like, I could do that. It's difficult, but it's doable. So we have the raw material. But that's only the beginning. Because remember also with Marxists, you need the people who will spread this around. People who are going to do this not as a duty, but they're going to be embodiments of these ideas. And again, because if these ideas don't get traction in the world out there, we're not going to be able to live the best life that we could live. So whether you are, I don't know, teacher, journalist, a creator, it's not about go propagate. But just remember that people don't respect middle-of-the-roaders. People don't respect people who don't stand for anything. This is why they gave the boot to Rishi Sunak, and this is why the conservative leaders these days last from a few months to a few weeks to a few years, and then they're forgotten. People don't respect boring compromisers. People respect idealists. People respect people who stand for something. So at the end of the day, for me, the vision that I had for the communists in my youth was the badass idealist. And that's what we should be. Badass idealist. Thank you.